Bill, I got a bone to pick with you.
All right.
Used to be
right into
a
it.
friend in arms, trying to fight the good fight, going up against the behemoth, and then you became a part of the team. They have franchised you in their acquisition of Convoy to DAT. It breaks my heart to lose you as a common on the outside, you're on the inside. But I think you, among anybody, first of all, I think DAT is bringing you on to help lead a lot of their strategy and product is the best decision that they've made in many years. I'll say that. It's also, as someone who observes the market, recognizes that you're going to do a lot of great things for that business that desperately needed, which I think as a participant in the market, I think is amazing because DAT is well positioned. But it also means that there is a lot of opportunities to fix things, right?
Yeah.
And I'd love to know what's going on right now.
Yeah. I'll touch on a few things. So one, DAT's gone through its own journey, right? It's a 47-year-old company. Obviously, as you touched on in the earlier conversation, the dominant, although I would argue
Ruthless.
Your words. Marketplace.
By the way, I don't know if I'm DAT, that's a bad term. Like being ruthless, the most successful entrepreneurs are ruthless.
Yeah.
Taylor Swift is one of the most ruthless people on the planet. But we love her because she is absolutely a killer. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean it as a compliment.
Fair. But I will say that I think ultimately, long-term, you win in the market through products and adding value and driving value to your customers. And ideally, that's the fair game that we all play. We build a better product, we push faster, we execute better, and we win. And I think what's happened in that 47-year journey is you've gone through a few cycles, but there was certainly a phase where it got maybe a little bit stagnant and where I think the approach to market maybe got more aggressive versus accretive, or driving value versus extracting value in the philosophy and approaching the market. And certainly over the last 24 months, it's pivoted hard to creating value, driving product, building new things, using this amazing asset that we have in this market and this access and this history to then leverage that for the next wave of tech, because we are in this transformative place in the market. I think what also happened is you had a lot of companies come to market, one like Highway and others that have come and filled gaps that DAT could have filled along the way, that if we had been more product centric and product forward earlier and just kept that pace going throughout the history of DAT.
I remember when I started FreightWaves in 2016, we actually had a partnership with DAT. And one of the common, it was Don Thornton, and those that have been around would know Don. And sort of the statement about DAT in those days was, man, this is a really big company, but isn't doing anything. And almost like a sleepy giant.
Friendly giant.
I like to say it was sort of, and it was a great friendly organization.
Yep.
People loved them. There was a lot of brand equity. It was big, but it's sort of a benign monopolist. And then Claude Pamela had the reign of terror. So I called it Claude's reign of terror, which was the CEO that was.
I'll let you frame that up. Yeah.
You can't. You have the consequences to your career. I can say it. It was a reign of terror. I mean, he went through a period of basically disrupting almost every relationship, both customer relationship and partner relationship in the industry. And DAT went from this benign monopolist to a loathed for many years entity. And almost like it went from people felt in a degree like, why aren't they doing something, to, whoa, they're doing way too much. And I think it shocked how fast that transition happened. The last 2 years, things have changed. Mm-hmm. Even when I've been critical of DAT, I recognize that the company is making effort to make their products better, the platform more stable. The acquisitions have certainly show a roadmap that was not apparent before. There's a lot of things that have changed the last couple of years. I'd love for you to give a perspective on sort of what you've seen from an observer.
Yeah, I'll tie a few threads together. Just first, in terms of like our position in the market and whether we're adversarial or friendly, I've always been of the opinion. So one, change takes a long time in freight, and careers in freight are very long, and people move around as evidence, right?
I've known you had 4 jobs.
Yeah.
Since I've met you.
So I think it's very important to create good relationships that are based on just, fair business dealing. And yes, it's okay to be highly competitive, and we all it's, all is fair on the battlefield and in the game, but we can all be friendly after the fact because we're all like in it together. And I think as long as you take that attitude and you're open and you listen, right, and you can come to the table honestly, then you can create the kind of relationships that perpetuate and I don't think, to your point, every leadership may not have always taken that approach, but certainly as we go forward, we are, I'd say, more open.
I actually use the term rent seeking. It felt, the term, anyone who sort of does politics, the term, I know you do, rent seeking is a behavior of basically extracting value without giving any return. And that's certainly what it felt like for many years, is that DAT was rent seeking against its clients. But there is something happening new.
Yeah, so just to lay it out, so Jeff, our current CEO, has been with the company now for, I think, coming on 20 months. In that time, there was a heavy focus on getting the platform stable, as you touched on. That was a point of, I'd say, a point of attack 2 years ago, for which we've solved that issue. And then it's product development. How do we think about expanding the suite of products within the DAT ecosystem? And that was primarily a acquisition-driven strategy, because we had Trucker Tools, Outgo, and now Convoy platform, which each of those bring incredible capabilities. And we're also in this moment in time where you have another wave of investment in AI and other capabilities. So we now have a team, a leadership team, an executive team. The executive team is largely new. It's a very new organization at DAT. So all that happened over the last 24 months.
Yeah, I think the industry needs a healthy DAT, and we need one that, because the reality is, as much as we as competitive, and look, reality is that Sonar, the only real competitor we have is DAT in the market, in markets we care about. Certainly, you could call Triumph sort of in the mid-market, but we don't look at that as the sort of core of our business. DAT is the only real competitor we have. But as an industry observer, as a reporter, whatever you want to call me, an analyst, the industry needs a healthy DAT, and we need one that is actually moving the business forward. The big sort of critique that I would say in the last couple of years has been the lack of focus on things like freight fraud. DAT was, and perhaps still is, a platform where a lot of the fraud is propagated. And look, that is as much of a function of the scale of the amount of transactions that go through the platform as it is anything. But there was a time when DAT was not taking the kinds of initiatives to stop it. Now, we're seeing something different recently. I'd love for you to talk about.
Yeah, I want to touch on two things. And one, I want to go back and just tie the knot on another point, which is I do want to emphasize, because I probably don't say this enough, that there are lifetime employees at DAT that are 20 plus years that have been there through it all, that are just incredible, get it done every day, in and out, through all the different regime changes that really make the engine work and the marketplace work, which I think is what there's a lot of, I say, tribal knowledge just built up in that organization. So I don't want to de-emphasize that. On the fraud piece, this is where I think the Convoy acquisition is particularly beneficial. So with one of the things there were two large value props in the Convoy acquisition. One was all the automation that's been dog-fooded through the $1 billion that was invested at Convoy, where the entire transaction has been solved from end to end. The second is the fraud program. So we have a product called Carve, it's a continual fraud monitoring of every driver and carrier that are on the application. It uses forensics across a set of data which is broader than anybody else in the market has access to, because we are executing that transaction and we see the driver through every step of that transaction. As a result, we've had so I used to, before the acquisition, Ryan had sent a tweet about 450,000 loads with no theft, which was accurate, although we have had one theft since then. So we're at about...
You're talking about Ryan Peterson?
Yeah, Ryan Peterson, yeah. So we have had about...
Your former boss.
Yeah, we're at 700-ish thousand loads with one theft through the platform. And we can achieve that because we have such high resolution. So that capability, we are now extending across the DAT ecosystem. So DAT has over 200,000 carriers on the platform. We have started to audit those, but we don't have the same level of forensics across all those carriers. But we do have we do have usage of the DAT1 platform. We have usage on Trucker Tools. We can see location data. Right? We have this whole carrier set. We have all the profile information within the DAT ecosystem. We can start to parse that all together to get a more accurate data set. And we were able to cut a significant number of carriers right out of the gate as soon as we started to run that through the Carve system. But that is a significant level of investment. We also launched a product called Carrier Management System, which is a way for brokers to set conditions on which carriers have access to their freight on the DAT platform, which moves us down that path of being able to allow a broker to have a curated set of carriers that it can actually access their freight.
Was the problem with the freight fraud for many years where DAT was fairly quiet about it, or didn't felt like they were in front of the problem? Was it a lack of the system just couldn't handle it? The perception was that I had at the time was that, and maybe this is, it's sort of interesting how people, and to me, it's easy to do it to your enemy, right? You prescribe the worst possible reason to explain this is a conspiracy, right?
Yeah.
But was the issue with the fraud problem for DAT a function of it wasn't prioritized because they weren't aware of it, or they didn't actually have the resources to solve it?
I can't speculate to how decisions are made before I came on board, but I can tell you ever since I've been there, it's been a top of the mind. It's
Everything's about solving fraud now.
absolutely.
So regardless of how we got here, it is a priority now.
It's a
Which I think as an industry, I'm excited to hear that, because I think without DAT's participation in solving the problem, it's just not going to get solved.
Yeah, and I can say just with what I just outlined, even since Convoy came on board, there's been significant movement, but well before that, they had started down this path. The product that just launched, the CMS suite, was the result of work over the last year plus of recognizing that they needed to get ahead of that and to start to build those controls and systems in place.
So Bill, you've had a bit of a journey the last couple of years. You or Uber Freight, then you were at Flexport. You guys, you helped. You actually arrived at Flexport. I just remember this. You arrived at Flexport before Convoy was acquired, because I remember I called you.
Yes.
I was sitting in the courthouse not too far from here.
Yeah, no, you were part of that sequence of events that led to the acquisition of Convoy.
Well, that isn't. It's like the dominoes.
Yeah.
Of buying Convoy to your arch enemy. Yeah, I'm responsible for that.
Wouldn't be, see, though.
Yeah, I need to get
All connected.
I need to visit with Ben Gordon and figure out how to get a piece of the action. But you guys bought Convoy at Flexport. I had heard this on so many different occasions with anyone who ever did diligence of the platform. And these were companies that actually, in many ways, hated Convoy. But every single one of the large players that actually looked at it when it was going under, whatever you want to call it, when it was being sold by Dan or whatever, said it is the best technology here, by far the best technology. Now we can argue about their business model. Why didn't Flexport hang on to it? What was the reason that they sold it to DAT?
Because it wasn't directly related to the core business. I mean, we bought it because it was clearly an incredible opportunity, and because I knew what to do with it, right? I don't think there were that many safe places that could have landed. I think there were acquirers in the mix that I don't trust would necessarily have known what to do with it.
Yeah.
And so we saw that opportunity, and we knew we could repackage it. And I was just very confident that there was incredible value in the technology, but it didn't directly overlap with the core mission of what we're trying to build at Flexport. So Flexport is a services provider. Brian always had on his mandate that he wanted to build a freight broker, and we made a pretty quick pivot with Convoy not to be a freight broker, which created a lot of confusion, as you can imagine, internally, because all of our sellers were like, great, now we get to sell truckload. And it's like, yeah, but we're not selling truckload with Convoy, which...
It is, you and I may have discussed this in the past, but I certainly discussed it openly. I always find it interesting when a actual participant in the market tries to launch a marketplace. I mean, Flexport was one of those. Mm-hmm. And perhaps Uber is one of those. It's always interesting to watch from afar, because you're like, it's the fox guarding the hen house.
The conflict of interest.
It's the Transplace problem.
Yeah.
And at Uber Freight was, Transplace is a participant, but it's also trying to be, which is now Uber Freight. It emerges the same thing. It's like, how do you truly differentiate if you're fair? And much as you can guardrail that, it's nearly impossible to convince people, even if you operated in the safest environment.
Well, it was even hard. Even internally, it was hard to convince our sellers that why wouldn't we do it? So externally, it was even harder. And so that positioning was one difficulty we just had to work through as we were going back to market with it. But then internally within Flexport also meant that we constrained how we built out truckload. So it wasn't unencumbered. So that was a real conflict as well. And that we were not going to go build a just open-ended brokerage and go after that market.
It's hard when your whole business model is serving shippers and BCOs to...
Yeah, so Flexport can now go...
You got to go call USA Truck or whatever.
Yeah.
Company.
Flexport can now go after that in a more unencumbered way. And it was also just it was clear that there was more cumulative value if with DAT. It's just this perfect alignment, and the
it actually makes
is just
sense, because I look at DAT's business model, and being the Craigslist or where freight transactions don't consummate, if you will. was always, it felt like at some point someone's going to disrupt that business model. And DAT is such an interesting business because and I see this in so many different kind of markets, is it didn't wait, it wasn't very early to let all the riffraff and things wash out and actually the market the sort of correct before it made a big play.
Yeah.
But it also didn't make many mistakes. Now it has had a lot of problems, but it didn't go into a market, and I think that happens to a lot of companies, is they go so deep into the new tech that I think is actually, as much as it pains me to say, brilliant in how the fact that they didn't, perhaps it was constrained, but they didn't actually go too deep into it. They might have timed it right.
It was, I will say, it was almost perfectly packaged by the time DAT knocked on the door. In the sense
And the
of, like,
conditions, Convoy.
yeah, in terms of reframing it as a pure tech provider, refocusing it on being a automation, the marketplace. And on the other side, I had seen this as a wedge, right? As a way of building, because it was creating unique value and it's a unique capability.
And I imagine a willingness. The brokers had DAT had done this 5 years ago. You had participants that thought they could do it themselves, but also a willingness to say, hey, we know this industry has problems. We know fraud is persistent. And in the past, perhaps we didn't like DAT touching the transaction. But if you can make our lives better and improve the security, plus the cost element, margins are inevitably going to get squeezed, right? It strikes me that that's sort of the winning.
Yeah, I remember when Dan was on stage last year, I think right after it was sold, and when he came up, he talked a little bit about that, just the tax of bringing some new ideas to market. And I think Uber Freight and Convoy and others have paid that tax, and now
billions of dollars.
Yes, billions of dollars.
Technically, venture capitalists to pay the tax.
Yeah. Because there is education for carriers, education for brokers. Like, what does this actually mean? And we're still going through that process on the broker side now, because if you think about this way of doing business and loads just magically disappear off the board, well, it means then that your carrier reps aren't booking freight. And if you got to feed the carrier reps, how do you think about that from a comp perspective? Who manages loads? Like, there's all sorts of SOPs and learnings and process that have to go on as this comes to market now on the broker side, which we're still early in that journey. But on the carrier side, they use apps every day now, and it's just how they do business. And when we started Uber Freight, it still was like there was a lot of training carriers how to use the apps and how to think about it and how to engage and putting all the carrots and sticks in place. And so that investment, that learning on that side of the market has already been done. So from a timing, yes, you're benefiting from now 10 years of investment by billions of dollars of investment that have been training the market and teaching everyone on, okay, what are these capabilities? How does it fit? Right, but I would say we're still early in that journey, but the hardest part, we're through the most difficult part of it, just getting the spark started.
Well, it looks at the timing, right? I mean, you could say the same thing with Microsoft, where they sat there for 10 years, 15 years under the Ballmer dares and they did nothing, and then woke up one day and said, hey, this AI, all of the internet, the cloud, Azure, and just plowed everything into it, ended up winning the battle.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a really interesting thing from a DAT perspective. So you guys already had the most important piece of the platform. You may not have been here yesterday, but we talked a lot about platforms. I want to ask Bill, the roadmap for DAT with these acquisitions. What does that look like in the next, say, 5 years?
5 years is a good timeline, because certainly in the near term, it's about absorbing what we just went through, because we've got 3 massive acquisitions, pulling it all together. It pretty much fills every gap in terms of the roadmap of what we wanted to build at DAT, so it's rationalizing that. Beyond that, I can see very thoughtfully, like, are there tuck-ins, are there roll-ups? There's a huge amount of investment in the space right now, and I'm going to expect that there's going to be some fallout of that, which will create unique opportunities and opportunistic opportunities for, like, supplementing talent or adding specific capabilities. But beyond that, it's hard to say.
And Roper is an M&A shop.
Yes.
They have a very specific playbook. They keep the businesses separate, as I understand it. But they have, I wouldn't say an endless balance sheet, but in the world of freight, it feels very endless.
Yeah, it's a fascinating model, Roper. It is a software conglomerate in terms of they acquire businesses that are market leaders in their space. It's really all about central capital allocation as they think about the M&A model. So they've got a central team that manages that process. But then it's very much about autonomy at the company level and giving companies a lot of autonomy. So somewhere between, like, a Berkshire Hathaway and a Danaher, and somewhere in the middle between those.
I almost call it a private equity fund that's public.
Except unlike private equity, they don't get their hands They're very
The operators. I heard stories of there was an operating company. Former executive told me this once. Like an operating company who was doing the thing, producing, and refused to even respond to the Roper's request. They didn't touch him because he was. I'm not saying you should do that, but didn't touch it because he was producing his numbers. And for years, that was just the way it went.
Yeah.
So,
but even then, it's it's an evolving company. They've got. I mean, I spent some time there a couple weeks back, and it's just an incredibly smart group of individuals. And so what just happened with DAT's acquisitions is a bit of a pivot in strategy versus historically they only bought highly profitable companies. And this is more about, okay, well, we've got DAT as a platform. How do we think about scaling that up? And what are the most strategic investments to do that over the next 5-year horizon?
I was going to ask you about FTX. How do we get that wrong? TFX.
TFX?
Yeah, FTX.
FTX,
Sam Bankman.
Yeah.
One created fraud, one's solve it. I was going to ask you about it, but we're out of time. So I don't know if you want to have 2 minutes about the Loadboard wars. Kaylee, do I have 2 minutes? She says yes.
Sure, I will give
Load exchange wars.
Load exchange wars.
I had to change it because the people get not load.
We've got the founder back at Truck Stop, and we've got TFX. It's going to be an interesting couple of years. I will say, it's marketplaces are very tough, and I think you touched on this in the earlier conversation. But it's getting both sides of the market correct and right, and this is where I think the magic of DAT and the 47 years of engagement. There are companies on both sides of the market that I don't think I've ever talked to in my 20 years because they just fit in different segments. They do their business their way, but they've been there. And if you think about adoption curves, right, you've got your early adopters all the way to late adopters. Well, DAT's got all of them, right? They're all on board, and we've tailored our processes over 47 years to be able to manage that and build products that meet the needs across each of those segments, which I think it's easy to underestimate how difficult that is and how much investment it takes to get there. And similarly, now we've got the best technology for load execution on the carrier side that we are bringing into the DAT ecosystem that is now rapidly scaling. I think the combination of those things just gives us a very unique positioning. I think it's much harder, and there's a trail of the dead on marketplaces. There's been over 60. When we started Uber Freight, I looked back to see how many Uber for Freights there were, and there had been 47 before that. If you've been in this industry more than a year, you probably can name 10 companies that have come and gone that tried to go after marketplaces. Obviously, we have the significant competitors, and nothing but respect for what Jordan's done with Highway. It's incredible, and he met a gap, and he met a gap that I think was an opening that DAT may have created. Should not have existed, right? And I think we're coming to the market very differently now, and plugging those holes, being thoughtful, partnering where we need to partner. It's a different philosophy where before it may have been a little more walled off. Now it's more the doors are open. Like, let's have a conversation, let's engage. And we have all this incredible technology that we're going to be deploying across the market. So I am incredibly bullish about DAT, and not just because I'm at DAT, but just part of why this industrial logic made sense is for me personally, like I've been on this journey of trying to drive this technological change and automation through the space and make freight easier. And there really is no better place than the best distribution channel you have
massive
in the market.
Massive advantages, and in the right hands. With right leadership, you guys can do amazing things.
And I think the trusted piece is right. And I think ultimately managing execution, but being able to do it with trusted partners because again, it's the Amazon versus Craigslist or any combination of those. There's a spectrum, right? But you hit the button and the package shows up. Like that is a trusted experience. You're not even, you don't have to worry about it. And we have that capability and that tech now, and that is what Convoy brings to the table. And there is no more trusted network than Convoy, where you've got one theft and 700,000 plus loads.
Well, Bill, I hope you guys continue to focus on the marketplace and less on the rates and data. But I wish you the best of luck. And I have an enormous fan of you and your career, and think you'll do amazing things for this industry through DAT, as well as for DAT. So congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.